a moment. Okay. Hey, everybody, this is Jeff Martin with Magic City Books. I'm so thrilled to have you all here to join us again for our weekly virtual author event series, which we have been doing for about almost exactly 1 year now. We've done about 125 plus virtual events with all kinds of great authors and, you know, some not great ones too, to be honest with you. No, I'm just kidding. But it's been a wild ride. We're trying to kind of a mixtape situation where we are doing, you know, something that has some ups and downs in terms of tone. We want to talk about what's happening in the world. We want to talk about timely issues, but we also want to have moments where we can, you know, have a little bit of a laugh, have a moment of levity here and there, you know, and that's kind of what we're going to keep delivering to you, you know, through the spring and summer. I don't think we'll be back doing in-person events probably honestly till hopefully, you know, say late summer, fall. We might try some outdoor things and see how that works out, but stay tuned and we'll keep you posted. We've got a ton of stuff coming in the next couple of months. Like there's a couple of weeks where we have 4 or 5 events a week for almost a month. And that's on our website, magiccitybooks.com. You can see the full list there. I won't go through the whole list, but it's pretty wide variety of stuff and pretty exciting. I will say one note, we are going to be doing some programming certainly around the centennial of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, which is going to be coming up at the end of May into early June. You know, we're going to be speaking with all kinds of people like Don Lemon from CNN, for example, and a lot of wonderful kind of thinkers and people in and around that issue. So pay special attention to that as well. This is kind of a fun night because this is a little bit of a part 2 situation we have going on here because a while back we were able to do a really fun event for the book Big Dirty Money by Jennifer Taub. And Jennifer was in conversation with our good friend Barry Friedman. Now, I've known Barry Friedman for at least 20 years. And this is his 9th memoir, I think, in that time. He's covered himself on page more than Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
But he's well documented. It's not number 9. But I will say this: one thing I thought about this book was it felt like kind of a culmination of where he's been going with his writing. You know, I remember when his first book, Road Comet, came out. What was that? 2004? When did that book
2000.
2000. So that's probably when I met Barry for the first time, when that book came out. So we're here 20 years later. A lot of life has happened in between there. And, you know, if you know Barry and you know his work, you know, it's impossible not to hear his voice in your head while you're reading this book and kind of.
And I apologize for that.
Yeah, in this case, it works out quite well. So it's like an audio book without the audio. You make your own audio book, but all of the intonations and the way he kind of sees the world is just such a great thing. And if you guys have been listening over the years to Barry's commentaries on NPR, and it all kind of feeds into this one, it's all these different rivers leading into the ocean of Barry Friedman. So really excited to do this for his wonderful memoir, The Joke Was on Me, which I don't know if it was inspired by Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark, which I think has a line in there of similar things, but it's always good to say the boss was somehow involved just for sales of books, at least. His podcast with Obama is going well as right now. So maybe we can get Barry on an episode. It'd be Barry Friedman, Bruce Springsteen, Barack Obama, one night only. What do you think? I think that could work.
The 2 Barrys and the Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. But thrilled to have Barry tonight. Jennifer is going to serve tonight as our moderator, and we flipped the table on that a little bit. Most importantly, I want you guys all to get a copy of this book, and we're going to make it really easy for you by putting a link right here in your chat function. We'll make sure to throw that in there a few times while the conversation's going, and we're going to have signed copies. So you can get a signed copy of this book at Magic City Books. So just swing by and grab one of those, or a couple, or, you know, if you want to read it more than once or give one to a friend or a relative, you can load up on those. And we also have copies of Big Dirty Money. They go well together, you know, and it's a great 2 for 2. We've got, there it is. See that? What a generous host. We have Barry, who is our special guest tonight. He is hawking books for Magic City Books and doing a great job at it. So really excited to sit back, watch this with all of you. If you have questions during the event, please put those into the Q&A, and Jennifer will pull some of those as we're going. But couldn't be more excited. Congratulations, Barry, on the new book. Always thrilled when we get to release a new Barry Friedman book. Thank you, Jennifer, for moderating tonight. I'll turn it over to you to get the conversation going.
Thanks so much. And Jeff, I feel guilty that I don't have a copy of Barry's book here. It's on my computer. And so I could actually like share my screen and show you the parts I highlighted, but I think that would be a little weird. So instead, let me be a bit more formal before we loosen up and introduce you all to Barry. Now, I know many of you are familiar with him, but there might be some folks who are tuning here on Facebook or via Zoom or YouTube and have no idea who this man next to me is, or I'm not sure where he is on your screen. So let me just tell you who he is. So Barry is the author of 4 books, not 9. Road Comic, funny you should mention it, 4 Days and a Year Later, and now The Joke Was on Me. He also is an essayist and a political and radio commentator. He appeared in the New Yorker barely and Esquire, where thanks to Charlie Pierce, he is known as Friedman of the Plains. I need to hear that story. Barry's also a reporter for, get this, I mean, it makes sense if you live in Oklahoma, but it's kind of crazy. He's a reporter for a petroleum geology magazine and knows precious little about the industry and has actually heard himself pumping his own gas. A native New Yorker, Barry started his comedy career, a career that has spanned 3 decades in Oklahoma, because while Manhattan had more career opportunities, Tulsa had more parking. Barry also hates people who refer to themselves in the third person. So that's Barry for you. Did I leave anything important out about your life, Barry?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. We can go now.
Okay. Yay. And so I have so much to ask you specifically, but I think I'm going to do that sort of throwaway question that no one wants to hear and see if you choke, which is, Barry, why did you write this book?
Because my publisher actually asked me if we wanted to re-release Road Comic, which was the first book I wrote about stand-up comedy. And there's so much about Road Comic I wanted to fix. Actually, I was going to call this book Road Comic, The Apology, but decided instead to go ahead and relook at everything I wrote about in Road Comic and just redo the entire book, the entire theme, the entire focus, pull the lens back 20 years and see what we could get if I covered some of the same material. That book went from 1985 to 2000. And so this book was written in 2019, 2020. And looking back, and so I wrote it again just to clear up some of the problems with Road Comic, and there were quite a few of them. So I wanted to see if I could make it a better book.
Do you think you did?
You know, I have to ask people who've already read Road Comic and read this one. Our good friend Linda Charnes said that when she read Road Comic, a number of people read Road Comic and said there's a lot of gratuitous debauchery in Road Comic. And so I guess what I wanted to do with this book was take out the gratuitousness and just leave the debauchery. So trying to have, again, the feel of it, but not quite as much frat boy take on the whole thing.
So, you know, it's interesting that you described excising perhaps from this book certain things that were gratuitously raunchy, right, and leave only its great literary value. But I'm wondering, you're someone who, you know, when you're a comic and you're bearing your soul, you're really also bearing everybody else's secrets. And I wonder, is there anything really off limits? I mean, because I was kind of giggling to myself in a horrified way how in the book and on stage, one of your ex-wives, you revealed an intimate relationship she had with a star of the TV show from the 70s, Happy Days. And, you know, I think, like, my God, in the book, you describe her having actually seeking counsel from an attorney because, I mean, I want you to use the F word on stage and say, my wife effed Anson Williams. That's the guy Potsy from Happy Days. I'm sorry if I'm bringing up this raw subject again, but it's still in the book, right?
Right.
And that's, you know, kind of, it's funny because no one can believe you're saying that, right? And it's also funny because Potsy, you know what I mean? It's funny, except the joke's on her, right? It's not on you. And so I'm wondering, Sorry, this isn't meant to be a feminist attack on you. That's not it at all. But
I was betting the under. It would be a feminist attack. And what is it? Not 710. You won. I won the bet. I figured we would not get to 715, but out the feminist attack. Go ahead.
No, but it's actually something else, which is, look, I'm the more gregarious one in my married relationship, right? I'm the one who's on Twitter and Facebook and chatting here. And I don't even know. Hi, Michael, if you're watching. I gave him the link, but who knows? He's probably doing something else right now. I hope. Hi, honey. I love you. But, I'm the one who exposes everybody. And, I think, there are things that I think are off limit, but mostly I'm off limits. I mean, so what I'm wondering is, you took things out, but did you put anything in about yourself and expose yourself more with perspective? Or tell me what your deepest, darkest secrets that are actually super funny, but you've never told anybody and you want to tell us here tonight. You choose.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just start with the Potsy story.
Okay.
I think the theme of the book, and it may be the theme of everything I write, is the whole business of verisimilitude. I mean, what exactly can you divulge? What is a violation, and what is truth, what is close to truth? That was sort of the subtitle of the book, is tell some truth up there, the key word being some. I don't know if my ex-wife had an affair with Potsy. I know he wanted to have an affair with her. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, that is important, because that was the first joke I ever wrote on stage that I said, if this gets a laugh, I may be a comedian, because nobody else can tell this joke but me, right? So the joke was, you don't know what jealousy is till you think your wife is sleeping with Potsy. I mean, mouth you can understand, and Richie, but Potsy just rips your heart right out of your chest. And then the tag of the joke was, and she didn't go to a therapist. The tag of the joke was, and she went to a therapist, and the therapist said, "You slept with Potsy?" Cool. So what you do is you take a certain amount of people's lives and then you put them on stage. And this is really, I think this is the serious part of your question. There was that great scene in the movie, Absence of Malice, when Sally Field is in the boat, I think, with her editor. And the editor says to Sally Field, look, I know how to not hurt people, and I know how to tell the truth. I just don't know how to do both at the same time. So when you write a memoir, you have to come up to that point where you are going to hurt some people, or don't write the book, or find new friends. You don't have a lot of options there. So if you decide to write about them, you try to do it with as much care. But if you take too much care, then there's nothing to it. And why tell anybody the story? So the fact that my ex-wife may not have slept with Potsy is hilarious. And yet it is somewhat, not somewhat, it is an infidelity of sort, just telling that story. So I don't know the answer to that, but it is something that I wrestle with, seriously. And you could make it all fictionalized, but when I write fiction, which is not often, people see themselves in fiction are even more upset that you try to fictionalize their lives, because they can point themselves out. So the balance is, there is no balance. It's sort of a situational moment where you go, all right, I'm going to tell this story or not tell this story, or the joke is worth it. And that's part of the problem is.
I cut in before you get to the second half. It reminds me of what people say about, if you go to Washington, D.C., don't go there to have friends, get a dog if you want a friend, and so
exactly.
And you don't have a dog, do you?
No, I don't have a dog. I don't quite get the whole thing with pets. Philosophically, I get it. I get now that I don't get. It took me 20 years to get the fact I don't have to get people who understand pets. Because to me, like a dog, I'm not doing a bit here, but I know dogs give you unconditional love. But what do you have to do for the dog? You put out food, and that's it. And what's the first thing a dog does when you open the door? It runs out. That's love for you? What human being does that?
The screen is blurry now. Why is it blurry?
Why am I blurry? I don't know.
It's okay.
Okay.
It feels like maybe you're talking undercover. So tell me the second part. Like, what about you has been off limits? And what have you learned to say about yourself to make yourself, you do laugh at yourself sort of, but I think, you're kind of genius in this, like your clear love for your father, your whole Jack thing, in the way you curate and repeat certain phrases, and you make us fall in love with your father, even though he's totally a pain in the ass, right? And I think he would not mind if I said that, or he'd probably say, "Who's Jennifer?"
That's right. He's saying, "Who's Barry?"
Right, and that's sweet. But what about you though? When is the joke on you?
Okay, it's a good question, and I didn't know what the joke was. I mean, I thought I did more of this in the book than I did.
I'm asking you to tell others, so to encourage them
Right.
to read it so they know.
There's a moment in the book, and it involves a woman, and a pink candle. The details aren't that important, or maybe they are important.
You can probably guess if you heard the word gratuitous debauchery in some parts stayed in, but yes.
Yes, pink candle, black sofa, but that's not the part of the story I want to tell you. So I was thinking about that scene. I left the scene in as pretty much as written, although I may have taken out some of the, again, gratuitous parts of it. And I actually had a chance to talk to her a few weeks ago. And I told her that she was in the book. She goes, she remembered being in the book the first time, but I changed her name this time, and she thanked me for that. And then she wrote me and said, look, she goes, when we were together, I was an adult, and it's what I wanted to do. I was there, but the rift it caused in my family. And in retrospect, she goes, I really regret the whole relationship. And I thought to myself, all right, now here I was thinking I had, done as fair a job of the scene as I could do. And my culpability in the moment, right? She was a little bit younger still younger than I am, but at the time she was probably 10 or 15 years younger, but certainly willing and certainly, not forced in any way. I thought, well, I was covered because she wanted to be there. That's all the self-ratiocination I did. She wanted to be there. I wanted to be there. Consenting adults, we were good. In retrospect, how much pain that moment caused her, right? Even if her take on it wasn't completely accurate, that's something I now have to think about. Maybe you weren't as innocent. Maybe this wasn't as much fun and games as you think. Maybe you did handle this too cavalierly. And I know I did in road comic. In this book, I hoped I took some of that cavalierness out of the book and did hold myself to a little bit higher standard, or was more critical of my behavior. Again, but I'm not the best person to judge that. I think people who read the book, certain people who are in the book, will have a much better take on that than I would. And just on that point, with the previous book, the one about my son, 4 Days and a Year Later, my daughter read the book. My first wife did not. Paul's mother did not read the book. And my second wife read the book, and my second wife read it and didn't like it for a lot of reasons. My first wife didn't read it. My daughter said the reason she thought that was the case was that we all shared this narrative. And I wrote the book, so now the narrative is mine. Mm. And it's an infringement on people who have their own stories about their own, it's the whole Rashomon thing. We all have the same event, and we all have a take on it. But I've written about it, so now my take is the take. Now, of course, the flip answer is, the smug answer is, go write your own damn book. The serious answer is, well, what do you do with that? What do you do when you steal someone else's narrative? And certainly my first wife, the mother of my son, certainly deserves her voice, her narrative about the weekend of the death of her son. I don't know what you do about that.
But, here's, as someone who kind of compulsively writes, they don't understand why it is that that's how you live and breathe. It'd be like telling you not to breathe, not to write about your son. I mean, I don't do it anymore. I used to keep a daily handwritten journal, almost daily. And I have, shelves and shelves of these cloth bound journals. Now there's, this social media thing. And it doesn't surprise me that it was easy for me to become, a daily poster on Facebook during the Trump era, or whatever else it is I do to write, to work through the world. I mean, I just don't know how I'd be if I weren't either avoiding writing or writing, But when you talk about, it's interesting when you talk about, yes, I mean, to some degree, when you become the narrator and you choose the frame and you decide the order of the story and what to leave into, what leave out, you're exercising some sort of control over the world other people observe and over their lives. But it's not, I don't see you doing it. It's interesting, doing it maliciously. I mean, I suppose that the story about your son wasn't there for a laugh. I think it was there for catharsis and to honor him and try to understand better that relationship and to keep him alive as you saw him. And but I can understand perhaps why your first wife couldn't read it, though.
Right. Well, there's a credibility that comes in. And I think when you post on Facebook and have posted on Facebook about Trump for years, your credibility was that of a headline. I mean, when you do a show, you have an opening act, a feature act, and a headliner. And the opening act maybe has a joke or two to get the audience on his side. And the feature act, the middle act maybe has 5 or 10 minutes. And the headliner has a way before the audience will leave. I mean, check out 15, 20 minutes. And especially when the headliner is famous. You ever go to a show and you see somebody with a name, if you sit back and go, he's not funny, but it doesn't really matter because I'm in the same room with, Jerry Seinfeld or something, right? Well, when you post on Facebook, right, you're a name and you are known, no, but you are. And so what your take on Trump was, you had an audience, you had a built-in audience. And if people were going to come at you, and they did come at you, they had to bring the good stuff. They had to bring their A stuff, or you were going to destroy them. You were like a headliner with a heckler. And a heckler who comes after a comedian, a good comedian, is going to be a puddle on the floor because there's nothing a good comedian hasn't heard. And that's the one thing, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, that's the one thing comedians and lawyers have in common, that neither one should ask a question we don't know the answer to. Right? So whatever we ask an audience member, whatever the audience says to us, we have a comeback. And I think when you were on Facebook, that was your strength. Nobody was going to stump you. And when you're a comedian, you don't want to be stumped. And that's why you need to have, or as a club owner told me, a dear friend of mine who just died recently, that the good comedians have A shows, B shows, and C shows. So if his or her show isn't working, he's got a whole nother tack to go.
Interesting.
And that's how it has to work on stage. And I think it also works on Facebook too. I mean, especially it worked with you, I noticed.
Well, let me ask you this thing about the contrast between the very, let me say it differently. One of the things I found most interesting about the part of the book talking about being on the road is how you describe how doing the shows was easy, but sitting around the hotel rooms and trying to book the events and killing time wasn't. And I just think it's such a contrast. And also to be, did you ever feel hostile toward your audience just because it was a bad day and you didn't want to get up there and perform? Or did you always get up there and know that you could just push the right buttons, make them laugh, and that would make you feel good? Like, I don't know. I mean, I think, was it ever just like, I don't know if I want to swear. I tend to be, I use especially, but like, are there ever any times when you're like, I just don't want to come up here? Like, remember the guy in the airplane who was just having a bad day and he just got off the plane and like, remember the plane? Do you remember the story that guy was having was it a flight attendant? Someone was giving crap to some flight attendant and he's like, fuck this shit, I'm quitting my job. He opened the exit, they're already still on the runway, and he went down the slide, and I was like, that's how I want to exit my last job. I love my job, but there's something about like just saying, you know what, I just can't do it. Did you ever have that happen on stage? You ever walk off?
No, I never walked off. And again, my motivation was odd because no matter how bad the gig was, no matter how bad the accommodations were, no matter how bad the booker was, the other comedians were, the audience was, I was working, when I was working, 45 minutes a night. If you can't motivate yourself, right? If you can't get up for 45 minutes, though there are comedians who can't. There are comedians who are so annoyed and you go, what? This is all we're doing. I work with a comedian. There used to be a gig in Cayman Islands. It was a 2-week gig. And they were so nervous about the flights getting down there and getting the comedians there on time. The show was Wednesday to the following Sunday. But they wanted all the comedians to arrive on the Monday before the Wednesday, just in case they couldn't get there on Tuesday. They were going to pay for everything. They wanted the comedians there on Monday. I got there one Monday night with the other 2 comedians, and they were bitching about having to be there 2 days early with nothing to do. They've been booked in the Cayman Islands. They're being put up, fed. They're getting a drink allowance. It was a really sweet gig. And I go, we are going to be punished for this. You put the Kanahara. You're going to ruin this for every other comedian. And sure enough, in a couple of months, the gig actually went under. And I blame those comedians for bitching about it.
Well, I mean, that sounds really superstitious. Did it go under because no one wanted to deal with you, or was there just not enough? They just weren't selling enough drinks at the show.
Oh, we just want people when they go to the Cayman Islands don't want to sit for an hour and a half, 2 hours and listen. They'd be yelled at by comedians who are in bed, comedians in jeans and t-shirts, right? So yeah, no, but no, there is a lot of, you lower the bar, you know, even at our worst, nothing a comedian does approaches toil. I mean, nothing.
The 80s, it's so true. I mean, you describe this idea that everywhere, like in the 80s and early 90s, there was improv, there was comedy clubs. Where'd it go? And after COVID, do you think that stuff's going to come back because people just want to be in a room like laughing and drinking and sweating and spreading germs again? Or, you know, what is that going to
I don't know. It wasn't that terrific before COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, and what happened is, I mean, again, every Holiday Inn that had a lounge was doing comedy. You know, they ran out of names. I mean, you know, you're getting chuckle butts and laughs and hilarities. I mean, there was just no more names left. So, and then cable happened.
Yeah.
So everybody could sit on. And then YouTube happened.
Right.
And anybody who had 6 or 7 minutes worth of material was on YouTube with thousands of followers. And then, or before YouTube, you had the shows like Funniest Comic in America, whatever, funniest.
You make such a good point. I mean, YouTube is huge, and people like John Mulaney, you know, they can do. Am I frozen?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, you know, they can just, you know, you can just watch these shows over and over again, and you don't have to like leave your house and pay for drinks, right? So
Right.
I get.
And one of the other problems is, you know, you watch these YouTube videos and a lot of the comedians you see will have 7 or 8 or 9 strong minutes. You put them in a comedy club where they have to do 45 minutes to an hour. It's not quite as pretty. Yeah. I mean, when I first started out, the whole idea of standing in front of people I don't know for a half hour or an hour, and you have to make them laugh. We're not talking about family at a barbecue, right? Where they're going to be with you and everybody knows the references. We're talking about strangers who don't know me from anybody, because it's not like I had a name. So if people go to a comedy club, even in the Bahamas where I worked for 30 years, right? Not like anybody came there to see me. They came there, oh, another comedian. Or maybe they saw me the year before, but it doesn't really matter. Most people just came to see a show. And I happened to be the comedian, or someone else happened to be the comedian. They don't know me. And so to make those people laugh, I mean, when you think about it, it is sort of daunting. But once you do it, I think I speak for a lot of comedians, once you do it, the big problem was getting the gig, getting the agents on the phone, getting the bookers on the phone. That was the real work. And then once you get the work, it was, you know, hopefully the show will go well, so you can get booked back again. But in terms of nervousness, if you're doing a showcase for you know, back in the days, you did a showcase for Carson or Letterman, that was a nerve-wracking experience.
And oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, let me just go back to before you get to the big names. You know, I'm looking at this now suddenly through my white collar crime lens, and not speaking about your own personal experience, but hypothetically, comedians were paid in cash.
Yeah.
So
well, if they're smart, they get paid in cash, because in the old days you get paid in a check. I mean, you know, you get
no withholding for, like, there's no health insurance benefit. I mean, it's good money if you're a young single person, or if you don't have to pay taxes. But I mean, is it hard to hold on to the money if you're paid in cash and you're traveling? Isn't it tempting to come home with nothing? I mean, how do you have the discipline to come home after being on the road for 3 weeks with anything left?
Well, I mean, I didn't drink. I mean, I didn't drink, and that helped. I mean, the joke in the act was that, you know, I don't drink, I'm Jewish, and Jews don't drink because it dulls the pain. If they're suffering, if they're suffering, we want in. But for comedians who did drink, no, you're absolutely right. For people, the ones who drank, a drug addict, they would come home with little money. I mean, a lot of us back in the 80s and 90s, You have the cash, you go to a Quick Trip, 7-Eleven, you get a money order, you send that home if you had bills. I mean, the ones who were responsible. Because again, to me, even those awful one-nighters in Kansas and Nebraska and Missouri that I did, you could literally make, and these are comedians you'd never heard of, people you never heard of, making $1,000 a week in cash to tell jokes in bars.
In the 80s too, yeah.
In the 80s. And if all you had to do was stop at a 7-Eleven and send some of it home for bills, it seemed like a really small price to pay for the lifestyle you had, right? And so that's what I did. There were comedians, a lot of comedians who didn't do that well. I knew one comedian at the Maxim who had the sweetest gig ever. They put him up at the Maxim, signing privileges at all the restaurants. So everything was paid for. They paid him $1,500 a week to MC the show and $1,000 a month to book the shows, the other two comedians, right? So he cleared about $90,000 that year without any expenses. After a year, he got fired and he left penniless. And I go, how is that possible? He said, well, I had a gambling problem. Well, but you could have lost $50,000, still had a gambling problem. Nobody would have taken that away from you and still walked away with $40,000. But comedians, a lot of us do not think that way, that, hey, I got $2,000 cash for telling jokes. Let me blow 1,000 and let me put the 1,000 away because this may not last forever. But personalities are a weird thing with comedians. It's not like we got into comedy because we did a lot of things well and we're going to try this now. I mean, a lot of us did other things, but a lot of us didn't. I mean, that was a great line that Carson had when he signed his last contract at NBC. They asked him what he thought about this. He goes, I'm particularly grateful to NBC because I have no other marketable skills. And a lot of comedians don't have any other marketable skills. And so now that we're all older, the guys I started with, I don't know what we joked about being greeters at Walmart when we were 30 and 40. And we all sort of took the deal, right? Because we got to be in the camps. Yeah.
Maybe this is just like being paranoid and Jewish, but like I'm always worried. Like I'm always trying to find the job I can never be fired for. I've never been fired. Like I overwork myself. I'm paranoid. I'm worried I'm not doing a good job, but look, I have tenure. But of course, I'm still always worried. So I'm driving home from work today and I saw this truck. On the back of the truck, it said, would you consider like sign up to drive for CDI or whatever it is? So I get home and I Google what do truck drivers make a year? And I'm like, it depends. I mean, if you're in the Midwest or you're in New York, and I'm thinking that would be nice. I mean, like, I was thinking I was thinking being a truck driver, you get some quiet time. The dog is jumping on you and biting you, the puppy, no one needs anything. I was thinking like you could listen to a lot of podcasts.
Wear what you want.
Writing done, but then I realized no, but yeah, but so I can understand why you would be thinking always a different career. What you're going to say, Barry?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, the point of that is I'm going to be 64 in May, which means I'm going to be able to retire in a year or two, right?
I mean, you can retire anytime. You mean, and also
right.
Social
Security. Collect Social Security. So in a sense, I made it. I won, right? Because I got to this point, because I guess the serious point is, what do most people, and I'd say men, but I know, because I don't know what the metaphor is for women, obviously, but for a man, let's say what does he regret in life? Well, he regrets not doing something he loves. Well, I can't say that. Not being able to travel. I can't say that. Not being with a lot of women. Okay, so you can't say that. So you look at all the things that you would look back and regret. I go, well, wait a minute. So what don't I have? Oh, long-term financial security. That's what I gave up. All right. So if I had stayed an advertising copywriter at 20, yeah, like that would have worked out well. That when I was when I was 50, they weren't going to hire somebody half my age at half the salary.
No,
and then I would have been 55 and going, why didn't you become a comedian when you wanted to? Look at you. Now you're a balding copywriter as opposed to a balding comedian, which is, I guess, a little bit worse. I don't know. So.
Speaking of balding comedians, of a man with a great Scheidel, your father. So you're really, oh wait, do we have some, let me see if there's some questions. Oh, let me give you a comment from someone, and then I'll ask my question. Someone named Michael Phillips. Hi, Michael. Said you miss your columns in the Tulsa Voice. Do you have any recurring podcasts that we can tune into? Thanks for your humor over the years. Do you have a podcast, Barry Friedman?
I don't have a podcast. I have that. I have my blog, the Friedman of the Plains blog on Substack.
That's not a podcast.
No, it's not. I don't have a podcast. I don't have a podcast. No, I had a podcast for about 3 weeks, but it didn't work out because, again, you have to do it every week, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it every week. So now it's just that my column in the Tulsa Voice, I was sort of I was sort of a double-A Keith Olbermann in Tulsa, Oklahoma, trying to throw as much shade on the conservative landscape here.
What is your? Can we just promote your Substack? Can I type it? Can I type it in the chat? What is? How do I write it out?
I think it's Barry Friedman at Substack.
Okay.
And most of that, and that Barry Friedman, yeah. Friedman.
At .com or .net or what?
Hang on, I should know this. I don't know.
Well, I'm putting this here, y'all, and try to Google that as opposed to link on it, and you'll find his Substack.
Yeah, and that's, as you know, that's half about my father and half about politics and my Friday list and my review of the Sunday newscasts.
So that's good. And Substack users can observe, or they can, throw a few dimes into the hat if they actually subscribe, which is always a nice thing. So, I love, what was nice to me about the book is to also, I feel like I know so much about your father, his eating habits, his taste in women and such. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Matt put it up.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. But I learned a little bit about your mother, and the anecdote you talk about in particular about taking one of your girlfriends as you went to visit her gravesite. You're laughing. Do you want to tell that little story? Because I feel like, how do you, if that's your mindset, if that's, a lot of us maybe have this internalized, particularly critical Jewish mother in our heads, or we've become one, I hope not. But tell me about this story, and then is that why you became a comedian? Go ahead.
No, this is well into my comedy career. I met a girl who lived on the South Shore of Long Island, where my mother is buried. So when I go visit the woman, and she says, "Do you want to go visit your mom at the cemetery?" It was a very nice gesture. So I said, "Yeah, let's go." So we drive to the cemetery, and she says to me, "I'm going to give you a few minutes at the gravesite." So I go to the gravesite, and Jewish tradition, put a rock on the stone to let them know you were there. And I get back to the car, and the woman says to me, "Is it okay that I stayed in the car?" I said, "Yeah." So she said, "Your mother would have been happy that I stayed in the car?" I said, No. My mother would have said something to the effect of, "What's the matter? She couldn't scratch herself to get out of the car?" So then she said, "Well, then I should have gotten out of the car." I said, No. Had you gotten out of the car, my mother would have said, "What's the matter? You can't give the kid 5 minutes alone with his mother? You got to be with him every." So I said, "So you literally could not win that." So, but my mother was, she was wonderful in terms of comedy. I mean, she knew before I did what it was going to do to my life. I mean, in terms of the marriage and stuff. But there's this one story. Hope I can tell this story about the tie. Remember the tie story?
I'm not a broadcaster. Are you asking Jeff if you can tell a story?
No, it's not that bad of a story. Well, maybe it is, but anyway. So I used to wear the neckties on stage, and they always used to rip right in the back where you make the knot, right? The seam there. And when I'd work Princeton, New Jersey, my parents lived near Atlantic City. I used to go down and visit my mom for that week. And I used to sit in her sewing room. We used to talk for all afternoon on these Saturday afternoons. It was wonderful. And while I was there, I'd bring her the ties. And she was a great seamstress. She worked at the Taj Mahal. She worked for Trump. And she used to sew up the ties like every time I worked Princeton. And one day she goes, "Barry, I don't understand." She goes, "Your father wore ties for years. I never once sewed up a tie. What are you doing with these ties that I got to sew every tie every time you come here?" So I say, joking, I said, "Mom, look," I said, "I meet these women on the road, and sometimes the sex gets kinky, and I lightly tie them up, and I tell them don't panic, but they panic anyway, and they start doing this, and they rip the ties." My mother looked at me without missing a beat. She goes, all right, enjoy.
That is so classic.
Enjoy.
Oh my God. Can I tell you about my maternal grandmother, Edith?
Please. You had Edith?
Edith. So
Oh, perfect.
I love her. She lived till she was 99 years old. And she always said she has macular degeneration. And apparently, you can now find out from 23andMe that you have it too. But they're like, don't worry, you're probably not going to get it. And I'm like, yes, worry, I'm going to get it, just like my grandmother. And when my older daughter said, oh, Edith, was she the blind one? I never thought of her that way because she just was always losing her sight.
Right.
I didn't think of her as not seeing by the time she passed away. But Edith was incredibly gorgeous. I mean, the pictures of, she was, I think there were 7 children in her family. She grew up in a dairy farm in Canada. And she was the one who married the wealthy real estate magnate from Detroit and made good, right? The other one married, Anne married Bernie, who was in the Jewish mob. And there's all of them, but Edith was the most beautiful. So she tells us, and she was, gorgeous, looked like a movie star. Maybe not quite like Rosalind Russell, but anyway, so you get the idea. And she was extremely, I think, competitive with my mother, her oldest daughter. And my mother was born on Bastille Day, and they named her Rochelle Hilda. I mean, that's not a name you give to a girl that you want to succeed. My mother changed her name. She now goes by Shelley. But at any rate, she was always very critical of all of us. And in my family, no one just says, oh, I'm so glad to see you, and gives you a kiss. It's always like, oh, you look like you lost weight. You look so good. Or it's like, what did you do with this? Whatever they compliment, there's always the implication that whatever you were doing before was bad.
Right.
And whatever you're going to do in the future, it's going to go downhill. Like I buy, my mother inherited that. Like when I was a young girl, she'd buy me a pair of, Guess jeans I got. And they were just perfect. She says, don't gain an ounce. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, I'm 15. I've got to gain an ounce, Anyway, so Edith, so this is where it comes from Edith, a gorgeous woman who, based on her looks and her, her eloquence, she had a piano teacher when, she was a teenager who, was from England. So based on the, this, she was better than the girls in the dairy farm. She makes good, but she's always critical. So the thing is, it was always something about me when she'd come to visit my mother's house. Someone says it sounds like their mother. So what happens, when I mentioned she has got macular degeneration, the one time I'm home to visit my family in Michigan, and my mom says, oh, grandma's here. Can you help escort her into the house? So I go outside, you're familiar with doing this with someone, and I escort her in. She can't see well, she can only sort of see out of the sides of her eyes at this point in her life. It must have been when she was in her early 90s, maybe late 80s. So she, is holding on to my arm tight. And then she rubs my hand and says, Jennifer, thank you so much. And then she goes, rough. You should use lotion. And so now whenever I put lotion on my hands, I think of Edith. But it was like this moment when I thought she could not be critical because she could not see me. It was like, rough.
All right, you want to hear a great grandmother joke? Jewish
Yes.
grandmother joke? All right. A guy gets hit by a car. He's in the street. He's not dying, but he's not doing well. He's in the street. He's injured. Jewish grandmother comes up to him and says, Mister, I've called the ambulance. Don't worry. Here, take my coat, put it under your head. Everything's going to be okay. And she gets close and she says to him, are you comfortable? He looks up, he goes, I make a living. I love that joke. Sorry.
Oh my God. Speaking of elderly people, does your father even know what you do for work? Or is that
No, that's not a joke. He does not think I do anything. He does not know what I do. He kind of gets writing, doesn't know how you make a living at that. And that's actually not a bad question. No idea what I do. He kind of got the comedy because he used to like coming to the shows, and he'd come and he'd walk into the showroom because they knew who he was. And he was very, very impressed that he could do that. And one time he gave me a great joke, and I think it was his joke. To this day, I'm not sure. We're in Las Vegas and we're standing by this escalator, and the showgirl comes down. My father must have turned 80 or so. Showgirl comes down the escalator and her hair is piled up and she's got on heels and just the makeup from the show, and could not look any trashier, right? In a sexy,
I don't like the word trashy. I mean, I think she sounds really sexy and provocative. I don't know why you have to call her trash. But continue. Hot. Can't you just say she looks hot instead of trashy? What?
She looks sexy.
Okay, good.
Sexy. All right. Okay. See, now if you were heckling me during the show, I would stop the joke right there and come after you. Anyway, so she looks really sexy. Not trashy at all. Very sexy. Very sexy. And my father, without missing a beat, looks at her, does one of these head to toe. He goes, to be 60 again.
I love that joke. Oh my God.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I miss the days before the pandemic when you would take him to restaurants, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like something. There was some restaurant.
Well, we took him to the 2-for-1 buffet at the Hot Rod Casino. And just quickly, so there was a woman there in her mid-50s. She asked if she can take my dad out to the movie. And they go to the movies a couple of times. And then she tells me one time that she feels my dad is having a crush on her. And of course, he is, and he's 90. Well, then she calls to tell me she's getting engaged. Her boyfriend came back into her life and they're getting married. And she doesn't know how my father's going to take it. I said, he'll be fine. She goes, would you help me? I said, sure, I'll help you. So we go to the casino, we go to the buffet, we sit there. She puts her hand on the table. He sees the engagement ring. He goes, you getting married? She goes, yeah, Jack, I tried to tell you, my boyfriend's back in my life. And my father doesn't say congratulations, doesn't say when's the date. The one thing comes to my father's mind is he says to her, does he know about me? Does he know about me? That was my favorite story about my dad. Yeah.
Whatever happened to the lady who lives like in the balcony next to your father because she wanted you to throw her up a sandwich?
Yeah, when they should throw my father up bagel sandwiches, she always wanted one. So I finally brought her one. Haven't seen her since because now I can go inside and meet him in the front entrance of the Hebrew home.
Oh,
but before they had no entrance, they had no meeting area. So I actually stood by his balcony and threw up a bagel sandwich. He liked the croissant toasted with egg, the best sandwich.
I did read today your Substack, and why does he have to keep having the coleslaw? Can't you do something different than the
potato salad, you mean?
Oh yeah, the potato salad. I'm getting tired of that.
Well, apparently he is too. He wants something else. So I don't know. I may bring him something else, but he loves the potato salad.
Yeah, I mean, try some other kind of thing. Like, does he like seaweed salad?
No, seaweed. What's the matter with you? Potato salad and coleslaw.
Did he get a nice Seder over there at the Hebrew home? What do they do on Passover?
They did do a Seder. I don't think he remembered, but yeah, they did do a Seder. Yeah. He tells me once in a while, there's a lot of Jews here.
So, like, do you remember your last stand-up show?
It was a Zoom show, actually.
Okay.
And then I did a show. Actually, a friend of mine asked me to do a show at the Tulsa Comedy Club here. The one called what is it called? I forget what it's called here. And I hadn't been on stage in about a year, and it's rusty. I mean, I was really rusty. But again, and not to be too arrogant about this, but you do anything for 30 years, and you go on stage, and you realize I'm still pretty good at this. And no matter how bad I am on stage on any given night, and I've been really bad. No matter how bad I am, I have to remind myself I'm still funnier than 95% of the people in this audience. So unless I tell them that I'm bad or tell them that they're bad for not realizing how good I am, the show's probably going to be okay because I'm up there doing something many of them think they can do and do in front of their friends and family. But on some level, they go, he's up there in front of people. Again, he doesn't know us and doing a comedy.
Let's go to the other side, that 5%. I mean, normally you're at your 100% and you're just up there, but those comics, who are the comics that you, when you were younger, even now, that you've either met or wish you could have met, or, being in the audience, think that their bits are impeccable? Like, who are you looking out at now?
There are a lot of comedians who you've never heard of. My friend Ken Rogerson is one of them. Jake Johansson was another one. Seinfeld's a great practitioner. Leno was terrific on stage. Stephen Wright, when he was on. I think Gilbert Gottfried is the funniest human being for about 20 minutes. And after that, you really want to kill yourself. But but in terms of historical figures or old timers, I mean, it's impossible to say right now, but Woody Allen's stand-up was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, oh God, it's so heartbreaking that he's so terrible because I really loved so many of his films. I mean, he made
Yeah.
me fall in love with New York. And yet, you go back and think about the movie Manhattan, even though I saw it when I was
Yeah.
her age, and I think it's just difficult, right? Annie Hall is kind of a work of genius. I mean, the Marshall McLuhan moment at the movie
Right.
theater, right? A lot of us were brought up on that comedy.
Right.
I think, he did Purple Rose of Cairo.
Purple Rose of Cairo.
I mean, my God, so it's really, I mean, I have to separate the person from the art. T.S. Eliot is my favorite poet, and he was a Nazi. I love his work. I'm not going to stop doing that, I guess.
Yeah, and it's and that's difficult because his stand-up was in the early 60s was brilliant. Mort Sahl, I still think is funny to this day, and he's my father's age. He's still funny. He still comes up with a line now and then.
Not to circle back to the feminist thing, but like, it's hard. No, not a critique of you, an observation generally. I just mentioned two male authors and comedians, one comedian.
Let me just say, Brett Butler, who was Grace Under Fire, Brett Butler, who played, was maybe the funniest, most intelligent comedian I ever worked with.
But it's hard for women to do stand-up. I think the culture, it's sort of hard for a woman to win when she's running for president. And it's also hard for a woman to be a comic. And it's this idea, I don't know what that is. It's hard, maybe harder to break out and get an audience to set aside expectations for what women, how funny they're supposed to be. I don't know. What do you think about
No,
that?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, whatever women have to deal with every day, put them on stage, and now they are it's a male bastion. Has always been a male bastion. So now we're on stage, women's on stage here. And what role does she play? Does she defy the stereotype? Does she arbitrarily defy it? Can she be a sex symbol? Does she have to be?
Although we look at something like improv, though, you look at Saturday Night Live, and Kate McKinnon is
Right.
to me like one of the funniest comedians, right? But I can't imagine her doing stand-up. Like, stand-up's different
That's comedy. It absolutely is. It
Right?
absolutely is. And people who, Adam Sandler, for instance, doesn't do stand-up anymore. He hates it. It is a particular, when you get stage fright, stand-up is the worst thing to do, because there's no band, there's no script, there's no other actor. There's just you and that microphone. And it is daunting if you spend too much time thinking about it in the abstract, rather than just, this is me, a stage, I know what I'm doing. I love Vegas. I play here a lot. And usually the motivation is, the security is, I wouldn't be booked back here if they didn't think I was funny. So
someone said Steve Martin. Yes. I mean, very good physical comedy and comic.
right. Yeah. Well, he had a great line about why he got out of stand-up comedy. He said, same reason every other comic does, third show Saturday nights they have a show. I told my dad one time, I said, in Princeton, New Jersey, they had a show at 7, 9:30, and 11.
Oh my God.
And I said, Dad, I said, if you start from the shower at like 5:30 to the end of the show, it's almost like a full work day. And he said, yes, but nobody actually counts from the shower. And I'm still only working like an hour and a half if you added it all up anyway.
Well, we're getting close to the end, and there's a million things I wanted to ask you, but not a million, probably 7 more. But
Okay.
what didn't I mean, on my list of things, I have Las Vegas written, and I'm not sure why. Also, a couple other things, but what didn't I talk about that you're really kind of annoyed that I didn't bring up?
Oh no, it's been wonderful. I'm actually glad we talked about other things besides me and it and the book. This has been wonderful.
What?
Yes,
You the whole time, Barry.
I know. I actually get tired of talking about me as much as that's why when you told the story about your grandmother, but your grandmother's story, you could have gone on for another 10 minutes. I would have been fine. I would have wanted that. No, I really don't like talking about myself. I know this, nobody believes me. I really don't like talking about
I hate that. I hate talking about myself. And in fact, I think the reason why I ended up married to my husband is, on the first date, he turned it around. I'm always interrogating people and asking them questions, and I don't like to answer them myself. And he was like asking me questions. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I was uncomfortable at first when I realized maybe like that would be like a healthier relationship than me just, give and take is good. But what didn't I ask? Like, what do we need to know about I really want everyone to buy this book, The
You
joke
didn't ask me
comedy.
about the sadness in the book. You didn't ask me about the
Oh,
bittersweet quality. You didn't ask me about the end of the book. There you go.
okay. The very last line of the book, or just the end generally?
Just the last section of the book with the mother and the daughter. Yes, you didn't
Yeah.
ask me about that.
God, that's such a beautiful. I felt like that resonated for me. Why don't you tell that story? Because that struck me about. Anyhow, tell us the ending.
I'm working a show at the Riviera in Las Vegas, and during the show, I hear this humming, this buzzing coming from some audience member. And as I look down, as I get off the stage, I realize there's a young girl in a chair, and she's, I don't know what the infirmity is, but she is clearly physically disabled. She's just, the look is intellectually, socially, psychologically, just almost out of it. Anyway, after the show, her mom comes out wheeling her in the chair, and her mom stops me and says, my daughter loved the show. And I said, did she understand any of it? She goes, I don't think so. She goes, but I know she enjoyed the show because when you tell a joke and the audience laughs, there's a vibration in the room, and my daughter can feel the vibration, and I could feel my daughter smiling. She grabbed my hand, and I knew she enjoyed the show. And I made some stupid joke about, well, next time come see somebody really funny, the room will really vibrate. And she said, no, don't do that. She said, if you ever think what you do for a living doesn't matter, I want you to remember tonight, it matters. And I said, I worry about that all the time. And then she kissed me on the cheek, and that was that. That's how I ended the book. So that moment, I didn't end.
I love that joke, but there was also a joke embedded in it, because you're as you're listening to her, you're also thinking you're supposed to be pushing these t-shirts.
Oh yeah, yes. You have to sell the t-shirts after the show. And the guy who booked the room was on The Sopranos, played Bobby Bacalari, Steve Sciarippa. And so he had a very strict policy that when comedians get off stage and they go sell the shirts, his line was, push the shirts, Barry, push the shirts. And I had to go push the shirts. And this dear woman and her dear daughter are there talking, go, I'm going to be fired, but I'm having like the sweetest moment of my life. So yeah, that was that moment that I had to go.
But isn't that great? I mean, isn't that moment that she slowed you down for a moment just to realize that even if people don't know that you're funny, you're making a difference.
Yeah, and again, who knows if she was just being sweet or not? But I bought it, and it actually made the moment. Although when I wrote Road Comic, that story may have been in there, but it was nowhere near the end and nowhere near the last thing in the book at all. So yes, that's the one thing I probably would have. I was curious how, if that came across at all, if that just seemed like it was again superfluous, or it actually seemed like it fit.
No, I was touched by that story, because it makes me think about the power of humor, even in the darkest of times. You know, that's what we all live on, and we can't the more serious something is, the more funny. Maybe it's our heritage, you know, Mel Brooks, Springtime for Hitler. I mean,
Right.
It's what we do, right? And it's how we kind of get through it all. I enjoyed this so much. I am now supposed to say goodbye to everybody. Bye, everybody. This is, I want to first, before I say the actual goodbye, thank you so much, Barry, for letting me.
Thank you for doing this. You could have spent so many other things, done on so many things on Monday, like going with your husband wherever he went today. Thank you for doing this. It was so sweet you did this for me.
Oh, and I
Appreciate
can't
it.
wait. I mean, you still owe me a Craigle now, 2 Craigles.
Yes, 2 Craigles.
Again. And also thank you, Jeff and Magic City Books. I'm really glad to hear you're doing something to commemorate the Tulsa massacre. I think it's really, really important. Say hi to GW for me, and sayonara all. Have a good Monday night.
Take care.